All right, let's get started. So I'm Wayne Carter. I'm the chief architect of mobile at Couchbase, where I lead the mobile products. And today I'm going to talk about building applications that work both online and offline. So let's start by just taking a look at what we're going to look at today. So we're going to look at why exactly our applications aren't always available and don't always work and are always fast. Talk about how we build them so they are. Then hear from the Firefly Logic guys on what it's like using our Couchbase mobile product. Take a look at a live demo and some live code, and then I'll open up the floor to some Q&A. So we all want to build mobile applications that always work. I feel like that's a pretty good goal. So the question is really, why don't our mobile applications always work? And why do we have a variable experience when we're talking about the performance of the applications, meaning how fast are they? So why are they sometimes fast and sometimes slow? So just starting with a typical deployment topology of a mobile application today, we have an application running on a mobile device accessing data in the cloud. So when the network connection is available, the applications typically work as expected. But as the network connection starts to degrade and the performance goes down, we start getting slower performance in our application. So that's why we have things like activity indicators and progress bars. It's to let the user know that something's happening. It's just not happening as fast as we'd like it to. So, and then as the network performance goes even further and actually becomes unavailable, we get something like this, where, sorry, try back later. And that's really just, we can't get to the data we need to run our application, so when you have a network connection, we'll get you back up and running again. So what does this mean for your applications? Well, mobile users are pretty picky, and when they don't like your applications, they're going to let you know. And they're going to do it in a couple of ways. The first thing they're going to do is leave you a really great review. It's going to look something like this. It's going to be 2 stars, you suck, and that's about it. The second thing they're going to do is uninstall your app. So these are the top 3 reasons that users uninstall applications. They're all UX related. The middle one there, crashing, that's within our control. So write better code, maybe test a little bit. That should help that one out a bit. But the other 2 are really directly related to the network. So application freezing, application responsiveness are both directly related to the network. And so these are all UX issues, but they're not directly related to the UI. So a beautiful UI is very important, but it's not completely sufficient to produce an application with a great UX. So to knock these 3 things down, we have to solve the network problem. Okay, so the problem is data location, so specifically data location strategy. We typically use a remote-only strategy where we store our data in the cloud and access it through a service. So if data location strategy is our problem, what other data location strategies do we have? Well, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. Let's take a look. So in mobile, there's exactly 3 data location strategies that you can employ. The first is a remote-only strategy. That's the one we've all used for the last over a decade, where we've REST-enabled our backend or some service enablement of our backend, and we access the data over the cloud to bring the data to the application and feed the application with the data it needs to operate. The second is a local-only strategy, where data is only stored locally on the device and never shared outside the device. And the third is a hybrid of the 2, where you store data both locally on the device, remotely in the cloud, and you have some mechanism for reconciling the differences between the 2 stores. So depending on which one of these strategies you employ, it comes with a corresponding network requirement. The remote-only strategy, because of its need to use a network to get to the data in the cloud, always needs a network connection to be available to access its data. The local-only strategy never uses a network connection to access the data, so never needs a network connection. And then the hybrid strategy only opportunistically utilizes the network to reconcile the 2 stores, so it only occasionally needs a network connection. So the next column here is the first effect on your application, and that's the availability of the application, or does your application work or doesn't it? So because the remote-only strategy is always dependent on a network to get the data to make the application work, and actually only produce applications that are sometimes available. It can't produce applications that are always available because it's not always available. The local-only strategy never needs a network connection, so the data is always available, and the applications can be always available. And like the local-only strategy, the hybrid strategy also has its data always available, always local, so it can produce applications that are always available also. The fourth column here is actually another effect on your application. It's the responsiveness of the application. So it's not whether or not it works, but how fast is it when it does work. And so the remote-only strategy, again back to its dependency on the network, is not only tied to the availability of the network, but also the performance of the network. So when the performance of the network is fast, your applications can be fast. But when the network connection is slow, your applications are going to be slow. The local-only strategy never uses the network to access its data. It's always local, so it produces a consistently fast experience. And then, like that, the hybrid strategy also has its data always local, so it can consistently produce a fast experience. And the last column here is just the typical enabling technologies. So what do you typically see developers using to enable these strategies on the far left? The remote-only strategy is most typically enabled today using JSON over REST. There are other approaches to doing this, but this is the one you're going to find mostly in mobile today. The local-only strategy is typically enabled using SQLite. It's a popular embedded relational database. It's available on all your popular mobile platforms. And then the remote-only the local hybrid strategy is enabled using some synchronization technique to do the reconciliation of the two stores. So the thing that I find the most interesting of this slide is actually the fact that if our goal is applications that always work and are always fast, the path we're on, the top row, it doesn't get us there. So we really need to look for a location strategy that achieves our goals, and that leaves us the local or the hybrid strategies. Now, the local strategy works for some apps, but most apps want to share their data outside the device, so it doesn't work for most of us. So we're really down in the last column where we're looking for, the last row, where we're looking for a hybrid strategy enabled using some synchronization technique. Now, the blue sky synchronization technique that we're looking for is some general purpose multi-master synchronization. There are interim solutions along the path to get to that, to get to some amount of availability and some amount of responsiveness on the applications. There's things like read-only caches, there's local write queues, things like this that get you some of the way there. They get you to some responsiveness and some availability, but they have significant limitations on how much of the problem they can solve. So you're really looking for general purpose multi-master synchronization. So if the solution is local data or local remote hybrid data plus a sync solution in between, you have an application with a database or some data store on the device with some synchronization mechanism available. It works when the network is connected. It works equally well when the network degrades, and it works equally well when the network is non-existent. So what does this mean for your apps? So it means that your apps will always work. So they're going to work both online and offline. They're going to always be blazing fast. The data is always local, so it's going to be as fast as just reading it. And you're going to write a lot less code. So these techniques actually end up pressing a lot of the coding that we put in our mobile apps today into the data store. And you end up writing mostly UI code and UX code to back your apps. And then, of course, the user is going to absolutely love your apps for that. So we know what we need. I'm from Couchbase. We have a product that called Couchbase Mobile that meets this. It's made up of 3 components. We're a NoSQL database, so we're most notably known for our cloud database called Couchbase Server. It's a hugely scale-out, high-performance database, and we've added Couchbase Mobile to fill the mobile community's requirement for NoSQL. So what we added was Couchbase Lite, which is an embedded NoSQL database for the mobile devices. It uses a JSON data store, just like our server database, so you're storing your records in a very natural way. And that's coupled with Sync Gateway, which is your cloud component that allows you to securely synchronize Couchbase Lite with Couchbase Server in the cloud and also other Couchbase Lite instances. So to talk a little bit about what it's like to use Couchbase Mobile, I wanted to bring up our friend Brian Hunter. Brian Hunter's from Firefly Logic, and he's the CTO of Firefly Logic. He's also F# MVP and well known for his work in the distributed computing and Erlang communities. And he and his team actually just built an app using the mobile Couchbase Mobile technology and the Xamarin technology for our conference, which was actually the beginning of this week. And so Brian, why don't you tell us what it was like to do that?
Okay. Is there a mic or do I just yell real loud?
That's all right. It was me falling down.
Oh, okay. Hi. I think it is. Yeah, it sounds on.
It is.
Cool. Yeah, so as Wade just mentioned about my background, so I would describe myself more as an Erlang guy. And so from that background, I've thought a lot about distributed computing. And one thing in all the mobile work, I'm so aware that mobile development is implicitly about distributed computing. And so I'm curious, I'd like a show of hands in here, like whenever you all get like a 6-week project to knock out some sort of app, like how many of those weeks are there to solve the difficult computer science problems of distributed computing? You know, I mean, is there like, how many get 3 weeks of those 6 weeks to do that? Okay, right. Of course, you know, most people don't get that time because it's not really even thought about. And I think that what they've done here is they have solved this problem, the distributed computing side of this problem that we don't actually get time in our projects to solve, and they've done it as sort of an infrastructure thing. And these guys have done a lot of good work, and we're really impressed with what we saw over this 6-week project of building this conference app or this sample. So Ben and I are both like, this is an absolute game changer for our development. This is part of our toolbox now.
To put that in more practical terms, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, at Firefly, we have done our share of conference apps, and they're absolutely terrifying. You know, you've got this hard deadline that's not going to change. No one cancels the conference because the app isn't ready, right? And then you've got to back it off 2 weeks for Apple reviews, you know, and that's terrifying. And then, you know, and then you've got to create a delightful experience. No one wants kind of like a spinner on every page, right? So then you're obliged to download data, cache data, you know, and but you want to focus on the experience. You want to create a delightful experience, but now you're kind of worrying more about plumbing. And then you invented this plumbing for this one-off app that's going to be used for, it's like a mayfly of apps. It's used once a year for 2 days. And there's no soft launch. It's either it works or it doesn't. You go anonymous if it works, and you're a complete, you know, idiot who's hunted, you know, around the conference if it doesn't work. So conference apps are an extreme example. So for us, you know, when we took this on, it was like, you know, we're hesitant, but Wayne and Zach, you know how to motivate developers for one thing. But the other thing was they assured us that, no, it's not going to be like that. You're going to get to focus on the important stuff. And that turned out to be true. It took us about 2 weeks to totally grok, you know, the simple concepts of Couchbase Mobile. And that's really, you know, a call to action there. It's not like this kind of thing where you're going to have to work hours and hours and hours on your nights and weekends to kind of get your foot in the door. You can really get this pretty quickly. So quick to learn, quick to try out, and well worth it, I would say.
All right.
Is that good?
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Ben. That was great. So let me just take a little bit more time to talk about in a little bit more detail the components of Couchbase Mobile that I mentioned before, and then we'll jump right into some more interesting code examples and demo. So Couchbase Lite, which is the embedded NoSQL database that I mentioned before. This is full-featured, so it has all the features of our server database, which is, there are a lot, plus a couple of additional features associated with multi-master replication and conflict resolution. So it's got a JSON object model. This is a very flexible way to model your data. It's the same data model that we use in our cloud database, so you have the same data model throughout your stack. There's no transformation needed there. It's very lightweight. It's about 500K on iOS and the other platforms. Same thing for .NET. It's native. That's really important for us. So we didn't take our server database and like cram it down and shove it onto a mobile device. We actually built this thing from the ground up for each of the platforms. So we had an Objective-C version for the Apple platforms. That's iOS and OS X. We have a Java version that runs on Android and any other platform that can run a J2SE compliant JVM. So that's embedded machines, wearables, et cetera, just anything else. We also have a new version that I'll talk a little bit about here in a minute. And then we have some integration with some great application development platforms, including Xamarin, PhoneGap, Telerik, et cetera. So it's also secure. So the data is transported over the wire over SSL, stored on the device using file system encryption today. And we'll be adding data level encryption on top of that you can add optionally if you want another level of security in a future release. So, and part of this database, you get the synchronization and conflict resolution all as a feature of the database. So if you want synchronization on the database, just flip it on and you'll start getting synchronization. With the cloud, we'll give you it makes it that simple, or you can get very involved in the synchronization process, choose your replication strategies, what data goes up and down, et cetera. But we make it super simple or highly customized if you'd like to get involved. And then, okay, talking about the new platform. So Couchbase Lite for .NET. So this is probably the most interesting for a bunch of you guys. So we're announcing this this week, the GA of Couchbase Lite for .NET. Zach is going to be talking later today. He's the lead developer on that. This was built in partnership with Xamarin. There are awesome friends here. Big thanks to Nat, Miguel, and the whole team at Xamarin for doing this with us. It was really amazing. And these guys really turned out to be some absolutely crack database engineers. So this will go GA tomorrow. So as soon as you guys wake up, you can grab the GA version. If you want to grab it today, you can also download the beta version. It's on Nougat and a number of other places. Zach will talk about that later. And this will be able to run on the Xamarin runtimes, but also the .NET runtimes. So moving on from Couchbase Lite to Sync Gateway. So this is the cloud component that deals with all of your synchronization concerns. So this is replication, which is the actual synchronization of the data, but it's not just about that. There's also a big security concern involved with replicating data across the internet, and the Sync Gateway deals with that also. So it has user authentication built in. You can use a number of popular public authentication providers right out of the box, or you can write your own custom provider. There's no rules on exactly how you do the authorization. We have a plugin mechanism that lets you define what those are. And then we have a set of fine-grained tools that will let you set up the data partitioning, so what slices of data go to which users, and also the read-write permissions for your users. So there's, on the read side, you have document level, which is synonymous. You can think of it as like a row in a database. So you have row-level permissions from the read side for users, and on the write side permissions, you have down to the column level. So for us, that's a field in JSON. All right, and then this is all backed up by Couchbase Server and Cloud. It's highly scalable. You can start with one node, scale out as big as you want. We have enormous clusters of these things backing some of the biggest companies in the world running their mission-critical applications. So same JSON object model, high performance, always on, super fast. So let me bring up Zach. I'll stop talking about the product here, and he'll show you some how it works. So Zach, show us what you've got.
All right, thanks, Wayne. So how's everybody doing out there? All right, that's great. So very excited to walk you all through our conference app, which we are very proud to say is a Xamarin Forms application. Just as a little side note, at our conference, we have a very diverse language community being represented there. And not only from the general population, but also from some people even on our Xamarin or on the Couchbase mobile team. A number of people were hitting me up with where can I find out more about Xamarin and this Xamarin Forms business, because that's hot stuff. So with that, I'm excited to go dig into some tasty bits. So I am gonna drop out of the slide deck. All right. And I'm going to get this thing here going in the background while we fire up Reflector here. Okay, so here we go, launching the iOS version of the app. Xamarin Forms does a great job of displaying splash images. So here we go. So this is the root of our conference app here. And there's nothing in this app that would ever let you think it's anything other than an Objective-C app. It's got incredibly rich interaction and excellent performance. So we have a couple of things I'd like to highlight here. First off, we've got this little profile thing here, which I'm going to come back to. We've got our My Agenda, so we let you use this handy little scheduler here to go through and pick your day here based on the available tracks for a given time slot. So as you can see, we've got all this great stuff here. You'll notice also that all the locations are TBA. One of the biggest problems that you have with apps, not just conference apps, but a lot of apps, is your application is useless once it's installed until it's retrieved data. But because the first-time app experience requires a lot of data to get loaded, the first time a person launches the app, it just bogs down trying to download everything. So one of the great things we were able to do here is actually seed a SQLite or a Couchbase Lite database and actually save it, embed it as an assembly resource. So the first time the user launches the app, we see that the database isn't there. We pull it out of the assembly, and we have some methods in the API that let us restore it from the file stream. And we're up and running with a ready-to-use app full of data, and it immediately begins synchronizing and pulling down update records. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and run my little script here. One-handed, no less, with no up arrow. So boom, I just inserted a whole 70 some odd items there. And so if we head back, we should see, oh, hey, now that we've updated the schedule, we just missed the party at Ruby Sky. Oh, no. We lost our reflector here, didn't we? There we go. So we can see that the last event at the conference was the Ruby Sky party in San Francisco. And now... yeah, we can see that we've got all the rooms now embedded in. So within just a fraction of a second, all of that data synced up. And most users would never even notice this on the first run experience, except that they would be noticing a lack of poor performance. They would just see the data there ready to go, not choking on spinners. Thank you. Yeah, great point. So all I was doing was simulating somebody else somewhere inserting a bunch of records remotely to simulate other usage. It was a quick and dirty demo hack to just curl a bunch of records into the sync gateway, which that's exactly what was doing behind the scenes. Yeah. Yeah, and the practical upshot of all this, and this is something that all of us have wished for at one time or another, it means release of our app is no longer the shackles that keep our app down. We don't need to be afraid of release nearly as much. We can ship the app, especially if we're doing some meta programming as well, where you can actually drive your application UI from the data in Couchbase Lite. Then when you do that, you can make changes after it's been approved in the App Store because you're driving this off of the records that sync back up again. So if we've had any luck here with Genymotion, we'll see the app up and running. Huzzah, there it is. So you'll notice here I'm logged in as Wayne, and there's this little cute QR code up here. So when I tap on that, we're going to bring up the wonderful Scanned It UI, and I'll do the same. This is a really popular feature at our conference where all one person had to do was scan the, sorry there. I forget you guys can't see through my eyeballs. So we just need one person to do the scan for us, and each of us, when we go back and look at our contacts, we're going to see that we each have each other's contacts, and that just happened. So I'm going to do a little exercise here, since I have some of my old friends from Xamarin with me. So we're going to start seeing now, too, how we can start taking advantage of the two-way data bindings in Xamarin Forms to have some really compeller user experiences and add some immediacy. So I'm gonna change my first name. I figured I'd prefer to go in at the conference as my old nickname that some of my friends would use. And you notice what just happened in Android? That with a blink of an eye, I had scarcely finished dismissing that thing, and already my friend Wayne's contact list is updated with my my preferred handle, Pony Lover. Oh yeah, jump. Yeah, the one thing that takes a while to kind of suspend your disbelief for is that to follow up on that point, the usage model for Couchbase Lite is I just worry about shoving my data and making my CRUD operations locally, and Couchbase will keep up with you. There's no schema migrations to worry about. There's no DML and DDL to fiddle around with. There's no ORMs that you have to fire up. It's just dictionaries that we're shoving in and making changes. But especially when, so one of the things we do is we expose a change event handler to you at all levels of the application, all the way from the database level down to queries and replications, all the way down to the individual document level, as these guys pointed out. So if I'm driving some of my UI, as we are with the schedule slots here, I can just subscribe my view models over to that event handler, and when that document changes, my view model is going to change, and because of the deliciousness of two-way data binding in Xamarin Forms, my UI just magically updates itself, and all I had to do as a programmer was just initially wire up those couple, that one event handler to my view model. That's it. That's so simple and powerful, and ever thereafter, things just work, and I don't even have to think about it. And as you can see, the responsiveness is fantastic. Kind of continuing on to kind of see another example of that. So we actually drive some UI here on this scavenger hunt area. So this was a fun little feature we had where people could see some examples of pictures to take, and if you collected all the pictures, you got the opportunity to get a little swag. Think of it as mini hacks for people who can't code. But can take selfies, and you have some idea of what we had going there. But it was a lot of fun. And once again, one-handing this. I don't know why I just didn't make these things shorter to type in. But I'm going to go ahead and insert a ton more records here. And boom, look at that. So my UI, I did not do anything. Once again, all I did is have just some silly little curl script, add some records, which represent something you might be doing in another client or another instance of your application. But what's more, and this is one of the cooler features, we're not actually, in this case, we don't need the internet to display these images, because one of the things you can do with documents, besides just using them as versioned dictionaries, is you can attach arbitrary files to them, which means you can add, you can put under source control, if you will, and version control, and under sync your assets for your application. Now this could be ping files, this could be PowerPoint files, maybe even some XAML files, and from that, when these sync, these come down and they're immediately available once they're done for you to work with. So in this case, if we lose internet connection after that sync happens, our users do not see a diminished application experience. They still get their images loading up. We don't even have to wait for them to delay. In fact, maybe we know that they still have good internet most of the time, but all they're ever going to see is your app performing amazingly fast. They're not going to have to wait for little blips a few 100 milliseconds later, because it's all coming locally. So that's super powerful. Okay. So I think we've covered some of the key experience parts. And so now I think is a good opportunity for us to maybe peer under the covers a little bit more to see kind of some of the machinery. So you've heard us talk a number of times about this Sync Gateway stuff. So Sync Gateway provides data orchestration services for your sync. One of the challenges you're going to have is, as you have 10,000 clients connected all syncing, you want to make sure that they're not pulling down the whole 5 terabytes of data in your backend, but only the information they care about. So you need some way to partition things, build a little bunch of little streams into a big stream, do some stuff on it, and bring back down only the stuff that's relevant. I'm not going to dig too much into this. This is our Sync Gateway, which provides authentication, authorization, and it provides data partitioning and routing, which is a really powerful concept. And the primary vehicle by which this happens is this JavaScript sync function. We provide some functions in here that let you create new streams, which we call channels. You can grant individuals access to entire channels, documents within channels. And a great example of this is in this application where we do our contact exchange. When the Sync Gateway function sees that you guys have swapped barcode, or you've done the QR code scan, the scanner sends this new, saves this new contact exchange document locally, gets replicated. The sync function says, oh, okay, hey, I'm going to go grant that other person who was part of that contact exchange, and we got that ID of that user out of the QR code. Let's go give them access to your contact record, and we'll do the same thing. So we didn't even have to upload anything. That entire fancy contact swap business was all about Scandit and Xamarin Forms, and only just a couple of lines of JavaScript in the Sync Gateway to actually make the data move and show up and do the right thing. So it's super easy, very powerful, and our Sync Gateway has this built-in admin tool that lets you preview the changes that you want to make. So you have this great debug test cycle that you can work on here. Do you guys want to mention a little bit about your experiences with Sync Gateway, given that this is kind of coming in? It's not something that people are traditionally accustomed to using, but thoughts or opinions?
Yeah, only that it was really kind of trivial to get going with. I think in the development of it, we first started out with anonymous users, and then we progressed to the concept of like some documents are public, some documents aren't, and like in the bottom there, you had the snippet. Could you load it again, Zach?
Sure. Yeah.
Is this the full one, or is this a truncated version? Okay, so I guess the only part that at the top there, there's actually 2 sides to that contact exchange. The top part is where we're actually creating the profile, and that's where we're adding that profile to the user's stream or channel. So that's the first part. I guess we have 3 concepts here. We have the channel, the user and the document. And once a user and a document have a channel in common, that means that document's now going to come down to you. So the first part, when we create the profile, is where we set up half of that relationship. We're creating a channel and putting it on the user. And then the second part is where we're actually kind of completing it. In the bottom there is where we're implementing the concept of public documents. When we set up our, you're going to do that? You're going to go into that?
No, I was getting the gong. It's time to
Okay, bottom part is when we do our public stuff. We're going to put this live soon, right? Yes. And you'll be able to dig into all this and more. There's actually a bit more in the real thing. But.
Yeah, and on top of that, we are very happy that Firefly's been gracious enough to let us release this as an open source application. I will also note that there are a lot of great custom renderers in here. There's some, for those of you wanting carousel view-like functionality, feel free to steal what we've got in there. These guys did a lot of great work getting the performance blazingly fast. As you can see in the app, it's beautiful. There was at no point did we have to pull any punches on design, and Xamarin Forms was able to keep up and deliver on both iOS and Android. So, with that note, any questions? Shoot.
You just showed us a sample where the data from the contact you updated got updated on the other phone. How is that triggered on your code base? Is that a push message that comes from the server, or?
That's a great question. For those who might have missed it, the question was how was that change triggered once it was made locally? How did it know to get sent up to the other side? So one of the things that's nice about Couchbase Lite is it's policy driven in terms of how sync runs, because we always have to be mindful that when we're using the network, we're keeping the radio on and we're draining the user's battery. So they're trusting us not to waste that resource for them. You can do either what we call a one-shot replication, where you do it and as soon as it's done replicating, that's it, or continuous, in which case we can either do long polling, and very soon in the .NET 1 we'll be using WebSockets as well, where we can keep and maintain an open connection, and as soon as a commit or a write has happened on the back-end database that Sync Gateway is using, that'll immediately get written out into the REST call that we're making, and we just let that call stay open, and we wait on it until either data comes out or it times out, and then we start over again. So the upshot of that is, as soon as somebody else has pushed something up that we have access to, Sync Gateway is going to write it into that changes feed that we're listening to. But if you need to take manual control over it, you can.
Go ahead.
Sure.
Can I ask what notification capabilities there are on the other side behind the Couchbase server for downstream integration into backend systems?
So from a Couchbase, the question was what notification possibilities. I'm assuming you're talking about from like web application or existing application, line of business application kind of stuff. Yeah. So if you're already using a Couchbase server to do stuff, there's a technique called shadow bucketing, and we've got one other technique that's available. If you're looking at completely different line of business applications, maybe you're trying to integrate with Salesforce or a SQL Server homegrown application or something like that, that same that changes feed, which is just a REST call that we're making, is accessible to you. So we call this the changes worker pattern, and you just implement a little service that listens, pulls down the revision IDs when they get written out that they're just changed. Then you can get the full document with all of the information in it. Then you just push it into your backend. And likewise, you set up some like SQL Server triggers, or use the service broker to call out when a change was made in SQL. And then your changes worker then pushes it as a normal document change, just like I'm doing those curl statements. It could be that low tech and primitive even, and just shoot the JSON into the sync gateway. And it's a very well documented API, very easy to use. And at that point, you can integrate anything in with that pattern.
So you're setting up bidirectional mutation streams, and when they sync in, when your mutation stream goes into Couchbase Sync Gateway, we're going to start adding revision trees, and that's where you get all of the ability to synchronize.
So we'll be having some sample code coming up reasonably soon that gives some concrete implementations. I'm working on a .NET one just to do Twitter integration, with the GitHub notifications, stuff like that.
We're going to spin past.
Okay. Oh, we got a couple more questions. Gentleman in the back.
You had three pieces to it, the Couchbase Lite on the mobile device, the same component, and then the server component. I work for a large enterprise, and it's probably several years before they're willing to put their data out in the cloud. Is there a way to use the first two pieces with my own backend?
Sure. So what you would want to do is use. So the question was, how do we deal with brownfield applications where migrating data over to Couchbase Server is not an option? And so that gets back to that. What you would do is there's a lot of accounting that Sync Gateway is doing in terms of like revision tracking and keeping change of those changes, especially to all the connected users as well. So you would still use it, but you can pretend it doesn't exist. That it's just sort of all wrapped up in that one box. It just needs it for that accounting part. And at that point, you can use that changes worker pattern to do your integration with SQL Server or Oracle or whatever. Okay, one last question, and then I'll be available afterwards for a question, or you can also come visit us in the pavilion area at our display.
And one more thing before you do that. It's just, and then you can always go to developer.couchbase.com. There's a mobile link there. It'll take you here to the mobile dev portal. From here, you'll get everything you need to start using the mobile product, guides, training, code samples, direct access to forums up there on the right. If you click forums, that's direct access to the developers that write all this code. Zach does the .NET code, and then we have a whole team of engineers doing the others. And if you write on those forums, you'll get responses within a couple of hours on your questions, if not faster. But anyway, go ahead. What's the next question? Okay.
Last question.
Have configurable conflict resolution?
Oh yes. Oh yes. I'm glad you answered that. I totally gotten lost in the Xamarin forums to get to those slides. So the question was, is there configurable conflict resolution? So I'm going to have to go in turbo mode, so I apologize. And I'm also going in PowerPoint user fail mode. So we implement the MVCC algorithm, which is the same one used by Git and Mercurial. So if you know how to use Git, you know how to use Couchbase Lite to do conflict resolution. So we don't call them commits or change sets. We call them revisions. And we don't call them branches. We call them documents. But they're essentially conceptually the same. And so when you have a conflict, that means you have two sibling revisions with the same parent. And so here's how we handle the conflicts. This looks like a little verbose, and partly it's because we lost the syntax highlighting. But what we do is we provide to you the conflicting revisions with the bodies of all their key value pairs and everything. And you go through and you create a new revision. It's like doing a merge commit in Git. So we create a new revision, and we go through and we say, okay, we're just going to pick one as the reference point. If this other one isn't the one we say is the current version, then we're going to mark it as deleted. If it is, then we're going to set the properties of this new revision we're about to commit and save to these merge properties. And I highlight in bold merge properties because I'm totally hand-waving over the hardest part, which is how do you do the merge stuff, right? So, but fear not, here's how you do it in one line of link to auto-merge, just like you would do in Git. So with just one line of auto-merge, it either works, and then we call save, and we're done. And then the other old versions that were conflicting are marked as deleted. The new one, the happy one, the auto-merged one, is now the new official current revision. And that syncs up and everybody gets that kind of glory. And if we can't auto-merge it because you and I both modified the same key instead of different keys in our dictionary, then we'll just get this argument exception, and then you can do your manual merge conflict resolution right there. So this is great, and I kind of like to tease the other guys on iOS and Android about it because they don't have Link's lovely goodness that they can do this in one statement. So what's hard for them is easy for us, which is exciting. So on that note, we're getting the flashing light, and they
Okay,
wanna-
come check us out at our booth. We're down in the exhibition hall, and you can look at all this code. Zach will be there, the Firefly guys will be there, and we'll talk to you.
for coming out. Appreciate it.